Whether you've walked the streets of Savannah or Charleston or admired the fantastic porches in Franklin, Tennessee, undoubtedly you have seen this iconic style. Tall columns, wide verandas, and a sense of easy elegance. This is Southern style architecture, shaped by climate, culture, and heavily influenced by its more formal cousin, the Greek Revival. In this video, I'm going to discuss where the Southern style architecture came from, what sets it apart, and how it adapted classical ideas into something distinctly more warmer, breezier, and uniquely Southern. Now, if you've seen my Greek Revival video, you will see some very familiar elements in this video as well, because they're so closely related. But don't worry if you haven't seen that video, I'll also talk you through what makes Southern style uniquely its own. The Southern style architecture began to emerge in the late 1700s and early 1800s across the southeastern United States, from the low country of South Carolina and Georgia to the cotton-rich interiors of Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Louisiana. As prosperity grew in the antebellum South, the rich landowners and merchants sought a way to express their status and prominence, and so they looked to the European-inspired classical ideas, particularly the rising Greek Revival trend. The only problem was these European-inspired ideas had to be adapted to a very different environment and climate. The intense southern heat and long, humid seasons required that structural changes were made to the homes, so they prioritized shade, airflow, and outdoor gatherings. So in contrast to the Greek Revivals, which were more about showcasing elegance, the Southern style was about making daily life bearable and even gracious in the hot southern states. In the Gulf Coast area and into Louisiana, the French colonial and Caribbean influences brought by traders and settlers further influenced the structural design of those homes. But ultimately, Southern style architecture was a fusion. It was formal, yet functional. It was deeply rooted in classical ideals, yet also incredibly tied to the land and lifestyle of the American South. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the defining exterior features which help you identify a Southern style architectural home. And number one is the raised foundations. So the homes were built on brick piers or columns raised up off the floor. This wasn't just for aesthetics, it provided a vital purpose, which was to elevate the home, allowing air to circulate underneath the floorboards. This helped cool the interior as well as prevent moisture buildup in the hot, humid south. It also provided protection from flooding in the low-lying areas, particularly the coastal areas. So this is a bit of a departure from the Greek Revival homes further up north, which were typically built on solid masonry bases. The elevated foundations allowed homes to breathe, which was a practical adaptation wrapped in architectural charm. The second exterior identifying element are the columns, tall, stately, classical, but in the Southern style architectural homes, the columns are distinctly less formal and less rigid than what we saw in the Greek Revival counterparts. So whereas the Greek Revival columns were modelled on ancient temples with strict proportions and fluted columns, the Southern style homes are distinctly more relaxed. They are round, they are smooth, sometimes they're square, but they're also functional. They are typically supporting the double-storey porches, another great feature of the Southern style architecture. So it's not really about the aesthetics, it's more about the function and the lifestyle. Speaking of porches or verandas, these are a key adaptation from the Greek Revival to the Southern style. These were very deep, wide, shaded spaces for sitting and socializing. The porches would often wrap the whole way around the house, offering both form and function. But I just want to take a moment and discuss the words porch and veranda, because those terms are often used interchangeably. But the word veranda, and it's often spelt with an H everywhere else in the world apart from America, actually has Hindi and Portuguese roots, which stemmed from the colonial influences that came to the area. So it's just a great reminder that our architecture is both local and global. The fourth exterior feature is a detail on those porches, and that's the colour of the ceiling, known as haint blue, a very specific shade of pale blue. So this tradition has roots in Gullah and African American folklore, where the colour was considered to ward off evil spirits, known as haints, by mimicking the sky or the water which they couldn't cross. Over the years, this was also found to have a practical application by deterring insects. And to this day, we still see ceilings in the south painted pale blue. The fifth exterior feature were the shutters and large windows, which were less about decoration and more for light and airflow. So the operable shutters helped shield the interior from the sun or from storms and could be adjusted during the day according to the weather, while the large windows encouraged cross breezes. In contrast, the Greek Revival homes had kind of smaller, more evenly spaced sash windows, which were more about kind of the uniform fenestration from the outside and kind of what it looked like, rather than trying to balance the climate. The roofs were another distinguishing feature. Typically, they were hipped with overhanging broad eaves, which were designed to shield the house from sun and rain. So these deep eaves helped keep the house shaded in the sweltering summer months, but also the roof line would kind of flow into the ceiling of the porches, creating a continuous sheltered space. Now let's move to the interior identifying features. But first, if this is helpful, please like and subscribe, because it really lets me know that you're finding this of value and I should continue. The first interior feature were the tall ceilings. Just like the Greek Revivals, they're about 10 to 12 feet tall, but the height wasn't all about show and elegance and allowing natural light in. In the south, the tall ceilings were central because it allowed the hot air to rise, so the main living area was cooler for everyone during the times before we had air conditioning. The second interior feature was the floor plan, again designed with comfort and climate in mind. So many southern style homes had a central hall layout, so you came in the centre of the house and then you had formal rooms off on either side. But these long hallways also acted like a breezeway, bringing air from the front of the house through to the back, increasing cross ventilation and coolness in the hot summer climate. Third up, we have the transom windows above the interior doors. These helped distribute the light and circulate air even when doors were closed. And you'd see them in both formal and informal spaces throughout the house. Feature number 4 was fireplaces. They're still essential, not just for warmth, but also for cooking. Don't forget the Southern style architecture originated in the late 1700s and early 1800s. So you could find a fireplace in most rooms of the house. But in contrast to the Greek Revival home, in the Southern style, the fireplaces are distinctly more subdued and understated. They are narrower and just downplayed. You're not seeing the grandeur and the massive columns that you did with the Greek Revival. In the Southern style, they are tools first and decoration second. The same goes for the fifth feature, which is the trim and moulding. Also more restrained. Southern style homes opted for simpler, locally sourced materials. So you saw kind of wood trims, wide plank floors, hand carved details from local craftsmen. The results were still elegant, but definitely not fussy or ornate. Finally, the interior colour palette mirrored that of the exterior. So you saw lots of whites, warm creams, soft hues, just very muted colours. But with the southern architectural style in the formal rooms like the dining room and the parlour room, you did see the introduction of wallpaper and pattern textiles as a way to add elegant refinement. But I think it's worth pointing out that today's designers often exaggerate patterned wallpaper as a key part of the southern style architecture, and it really wasn't at the time. It was just an element. These homes were designed for long afternoons, open windows and lots of conversation. So now that you're an expert on Southern style architecture, I just want to take a look at a modern interpretation of both an exterior and an interior. So let's pretend you're turning up on a listing appointment or you're showing a house to buyers. Let's first of all have a look at this stunning Southern style architectural home. Here are the following things that I would point out. So first of all, the house looks to be elevated. If you look at the steps, you can see that the house is raised up, although the topography of the land is very flat. So it looks like that's definitely for aesthetics and tradition. Secondly, look at all the white columns. Remember, the columns on a Southern style home are a lot more relaxed than the Greek Revival. So this has square columns supporting the porches. The porches are another factor. Here we've got porches on the first and second floor. I would probably also mention, we can't see from this picture whether the ceilings are painted the haint blue, but I would probably also comment on it. Even if the ceilings are white, I would say something like, oh, it's a pity it's not haint blue, and then talk about the spirits and the story behind it, because I think people always find that really interesting if they don't know it. Then I would comment on the shutters. There's only a couple of shutters on the sides of the house here, but I would discuss how, they used to be essential and operable in order to control the kind of temperatures on the inside and manage the climate. And then finally, I'd just point out about the overhanging eaves on the roof to help keep the house shaded. Moving to the interior and looking at this downstairs room, I would point out the tall ceilings. This looks to be in the range of 10 to 12 feet. This room also seems to have a walkout to a lovely porch, reinforcing the flow and the indoor-outdoor living. The colour palette is traditional with the soft, muted colours of the time. And actually look here how the draperies have the pattern design. Remember talking about the wallpaper and the pattern textiles. That's just reinforcing it here. The fireplace is very understated. It's pretty, but it's also quite plain. And in terms of the trim and moulding, this room, although it does have a stunning coffered ceiling, otherwise it's pretty low key, elegant nonetheless, but there isn't a huge amount in terms of trim. While the Southern style architectural home clearly borrows very heavily from the Greek Revival movement, especially in terms of columns, symmetry and classical proportions, it also diverges in ways that reflect regional needs and cultural priorities. Influences from French colonial, Caribbean and Creole architecture further added depth, resulting in a style that's less about strict academic rules and more about warmth, ease and everyday life. I hope this has been helpful. Please check out my other architectural styles, especially the Greek Revival, and I'll see you next time.